Okay, now we're on slide 41, and I want to talk about length tension relationship in skeletal muscle. But first, I'm going to go back to isometric and isotonic contraction because they really both exist in nature. Think of it this way: you want to pick up your textbook by flexing your forearm. You grab the textbook and you start to contract your muscle. And the first part of it's going to be isometric because you've generated some tension, but not enough to lift the book. Finally, when you generate enough tension to lift the book, you fire enough motor units to do this, then the book will lift up. And now it becomes isotonic. So actually, the first contraction is always isotonic until you generate enough tension to lift something, and then it's isometric. And then when you finally generate enough tension to lift something, it becomes isotonic. Okay, muscle cells generate optimal tension at a particular length when there's enough overlap between thin and thick filaments, but not too much. And I'll show you this in graphic form on the next slide. So here's muscle tension on the y-axis, sarcomere length on the x-axis, and as you can see, there's an optimal um, length for maximal contraction. It's called a resting length when you have a certain amount of overlap between thin and thick filaments, but not too much. If it's too much, if it's too stretched, there's not enough overlap, and there can't be many cross bridges forming, and it won't generate enough tension, as much tension. But if it's too short, then there's too much overlap, and the H zone is smaller, and of course that's the amount that's contracted, the H zone, and so you generate less tension if it's not stretched enough. So in your body, your muscles are stretched to a particular amount, and just the right length to cause maximal contraction, maximal tension generation if you need it. So skeletal muscle fatigues. What is that caused by? Decreasing glycogen stores, not enough calcium, possibly at the neuromuscular junction or in the SR, sodium potassium imbalances, increased phosphate ion concentrations, which usually causes changes in pH, and lactic acid buildup. These cause fatigue in skeletal muscle. Okay, slide 44, we can talk about resistance versus endurance exercise or cardiovascular exercise. Resistance leads to muscle hypertrophy and maybe a little bit of hyperplasia, but not much. Hyperplasia is making new cells, and we don't really make very many new cells. If you go to the gym and you pump up, you make larger cells. Endurance leads to angiogenesis, which this is cardio. Uh, and angiogenesis means a blood vessel formation. You have a better oxygen delivery system. If you look at marathon runners, they don't have big bulging muscles. They look pretty thin. What they have is because they have enough muscles to move their body weight along, but they have an incredible oxygen delivery system. So they can run a sub 5 minute mile and still use oxygen. When if we tried that, we would be able to get oxygen enough to our muscles in order to do that. And really, when you exercise, you sort of damage your muscles a little bit. But then that's why you say the next day do a different exercise, let it heal, and it heals and comes back better. And really, muscle is one of the tissues, like bone. Also, use it or lose it. If you don't use your muscles, they will atrophy, and sometimes effects of atrophy are irreversible. You can't bring them back. Okay, slide 45, effective aging. The amount of exercise you do, that's up to you. It's completely voluntary. Effective aging, it's irrevocable, and it always happens. Sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass with age. It's natural. It's going to happen. It's not due to decrease in physical activity, but the way to forestall it and I say minimize it is to stay active even in your later years. So it can be minimized by continued physical activity. And fibrosis is replacing muscle tissue by fibrous connective tissue, which does not contract.